Hello, and thank you for joining us today on the Gentle Art of Crushing It show, where we focus on learning and sharing with our listeners all there is to know about how to create success in our lives. This show stands on the shoulders of giants. Our mission is to empower and inspire our listeners to create the life of their dreams whilst having a blast in the process. Let's celebrate life together. Welcome to the show.
Welcome to the Gentle Art of Crushing It podcast, Passive Investing Edition. My name is Randy Smith, and I'm the founder of Impact Equity. And our sole purpose is to help educate and inspire the passive investor as they either begin this transition or continue the transition from traditional investing over to passive investing. So today we have got an amazing podcast. Today we've got Andrew Rosenberg with us. Welcome to the show, Andrew.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Randy. It's a real pleasure. I'm looking forward to this.
Awesome. Well, very good. Well, why don't we go ahead and just jump right in? Can you maybe walk us through kind of your background and what led you to the passive investing space?
Oh, okay, certainly. Yeah. Our family owns a family business. And my father's been running it for 50 years. I'm in the last 20, so we still work together, which I'm very fortunate to be able to come and live in Hawaii. It's a pretty expensive market, cost of living out here. So most of my high school friends all got jobs on the mainland and couldn't come back. So I'm very fortunate. So, the expression live where you want, invest where it makes sense really applies with someone like me. Much like California, the prices here are very, very, very high. Median home prices over $1 million. Very hard to find cash flowing properties. If you're going to do it, the guys that are doing it more in the vacation and short-term rental market. That's not really my field. I'm more of a multifamily, boring, steady Eddie personality, very boring personality. I like just stable, sign a person to 1 and 2 year lease. That's my comfort zone. So we started buying real estate on the mainland about 12 years ago. Did well, and had ups and downs. You have problems with tenants and getting calls from the contractor, getting calls from vendors, brokers, lenders. God forbid the property manager calls you and the AC's broken. It got old after 10 years, 10, 12 years of doing it. Also, the portfolio just got too big. It's a good problem, but it got to be to the point where I had to decide, do I want to make a company out of this and start hiring people, or do I need to find another route? So I was lucky enough. I met a syndicator. We kind of hit it off and became friends, and decided, okay, we'll just test the waters out, do a minimum deal, go with the pref equity, capping the return, but higher up the capital stack because I'm a pretty conservative guy, and let's just see how it goes. You get those distributions in monthly, and you start realizing, okay, this isn't crazy or a fraud or something. And then it dawns on you, okay, I need to learn more because you don't know what you're doing. You're just basically trusting somebody. And it's not like the stock market where you can go to, the store and pick up, commercial real estate guidebook, and it's going to rank out who are the best commercial real estate syndicators. Not to criticize the SEC, but in trying to protect investors, I don't think they actually protect investors. I think they hurt investors. The 506B, 506C nonsense, in a lot of ways, I think hinders investors because the better guys don't necessarily advertise, or there's no central source. You can't find out who's good and who's bad. There's no objective rating system for syndicators. You're kind of just on your own. And once you're an accredited investor, the belief then is, well, you're accredited, you know enough, you're on your own, go figure it out. Right. So it's kind of disingenuous because investing in a mutual fund is way less complicated than investing in a 400-unit apartment building. But I can go to a store and buy a magazine about that, but I can't do that for real estate. So that led me to thinking, okay, so how are you going to do this? I'm not a book reader by personality. I don't have the patience for it generally. And usually once a book's published, it's already outdated, in my opinion. Not everything, but enough. So I was like, all right, I hate social media, but we got to do it. And I'm just not a Facebook guy. So I was like, okay, we'll skip to LinkedIn. At least it's mostly for professionals, and most of the posts kind of stick to, being professional. And I started seeing others, real estate people. So I would follow them, some of them, get to know them, connect. And then as you see them posting on other things, you see some more people. And I started noticing that everyone's going to these Zoom meetups. And I was like, you know what, I better go. And the other side of the brain's going, you're an introvert. You've done the lone wolf thing for 12 years. You don't really like talking to strangers. Are you sure you can do this?
Right.
And, the other voice in my head said, don't worry, we'll be fine. We can adapt. And then, I started looking around to find times that would work. I'm in Hawaii, so we're 6 hours behind New York. So it's pretty hard. A lot of meetings are during working hours. For me, 7 a.m. is almost already a working hour because I start getting phone calls from clients. So like most of my meetings are 6 a.m. or even now, unfortunately, I'm doing a lot of 5 a.m.s because I have to fit people in before my regular 6 o'clock. So then it was, do you really want to get up early? And of course, the other side of the brain goes, look, winners get up early, losers make excuses, go to bed earlier, figure it out. So, okay, I'm still transitioning. There's a couple of my 6 a.m. meetings that I'm still going, hey guys, wait, give me a second here. I'm brushing my teeth. I'm still waking up.
Right.
But it's been a good transition. So my first Zoom meeting was with Angel Williams' Marvelous Monday Meetup. And I got to tell you, it was like pretty cool. I was like, wow, these people are all really nice, really intelligent. They know what they're doing. These are people, with their boots in the ground, sleeves rolled up, really know what they're doing. As a side note, I always have a beef with journalists, and headlines, and, CNBC, on TV or in print, because it's like, I don't know, do you even own real estate? Some of these articles, I'm like, you're a 23-year-old who graduated from some Ivy League school, but you live in mom's basement. You've never even owned real estate. I'm going to take your advice. So I was like, no, I want to talk to like the people really, in the trenches, knowing what they're doing. And they would ask, who are you? And I'd say, okay, I've done 10 years of my own thing, and it was okay, successful, and it was single family. And, light bulbs kind of went on scale, and I just want to do less. Let's do syndications. And a lot of them would say, hey, that was me. That was me 5 years ago. That was me 10 years ago. And I would ask them, okay, well, can you tell me more? Because you're kind of who I want to be when I grow up,
Yeah.
So a really great guy, Joe Giuliani, I always butcher his name, but
Giuliani.
Yeah, he knows who he is, and everybody knows him.
He was on the podcast last week.
Yeah,
as a matter of
he's
fact.
the guy that I want to be when I grow up. I really look up to, in many ways, not just in business or real estate. I mean, he's just such a good guy and a gentleman. When I'm his age, I hope to be as wise and kind as he is. And, Charles Lemaris, another investor, older guy, he's done, God, I think like 30 syndications that have exited, and he's in 30 active. I mean, so the guy's at a totally other level. But if you email him and call him up, he's happy to help you. He's just a great guy. So awesome. a lot of mindset things about, not being scared to contact people, not being scared to ask questions, being open to criticism, being open to being told, hey, what are you doing? That's dumb. And not having your ego rile up and say, wait, I did it for 10 years, 10, 12 years, just fine. What do I need you for? You're the one who showed up to the CRE network meeting. There's a reason. The reason is that you wanted to do better and bigger things or easier things with your time and money. So, flash forward now, on Tuesdays, I'm with Isaac Weinberg's group. Wednesdays, I'm with George Roberts' group. Thursdays, I leave open because I have a new project that we'll get into. And then, Fridays, I'm hanging out with Brian Briscoe's group. And, Brian's group is tough for me. The start's a little later. So sometimes I have to exit, halfway through or, 3/4 of the way through. But I make a commitment never to miss his meeting as much as possible.
Okay.
And, I probably learned more in 6 months than I learned the last 10 years of investing. It's very, very humbling to realize like there's all these things that I missed because I was so involved in my own little niche, my own little way of doing things. And don't get me wrong, I learned a lot. And the only regret I have is I should have jumped to the next step sooner. I stayed on the stepping stone too long.
Okay.
And that's fine. I really believe, I disagree with a lot of people on one issue. I really don't think most people should jump right to a syndication. Owning a property teaches you a lot of little things. First off, it measures your temperance, your temper for risk and cash flow. Everybody says that they've got diamond hands, right? Everybody says they can hodl and hold forever, and I'm okay with risk. And then the first time they get a phone call about, hey, the AC's broken, they freak out. And
Yeah.
then you're learning about yourself. Are you really able to handle risk? The first time you got to evict a tenant, or there's a late pay, or tenant moves out and it takes a little longer than you thought to get a new tenant. It doesn't You don't just click a finger and magically there's a tenant in there. So
Yeah.
you kind of learn the business, granted at a much smaller level, but there's an appreciation for a property manager. I watch a lot of presentations and they just skip right over the property management. And I'm like, whoa, 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 wait.
Right.
When in talking with people and in my own experience, then the two biggest factors for deals not succeeding or underperforming is at the buy side there's some kind of due diligence problem, whether it was your fault as the due diligence person or misrepresentation or bad faith from the seller. That's
Okay.
not even that common. The most common thing that I find, at least in my experience and anecdotally, is property management. And my beef with some sponsors is you can't later blame the sponsor. Oh, we had to fire them. We got somebody new. That's all well and good. I'm glad you cut the cord and found a better person. But you're collecting a 1% to 3% asset management fee. It was your job to hire the right property manager. You
Yep.
also got an acquisition fee. So you got paid for that as well. So there's no excuse for the property manager not working out. It happens. That's fine. I mean, I get it. But you're not off the hook. You're the captain of the ship if you're the GP.
Yep.
And yeah, I'm going to be brutally tough on you because you're getting compensated for it. And we're trusting our money with you. There's lots of sponsors out there. So that's a pet peeve of mine with the sponsor of if they don't respect the property manager relationship, it causes me to worry that there's one more element of risk in a deal.
Okay.
Because we've all seen, a lot of us have, when our younger days, have rented at a building. You walk into a leasing office and they're not the best and brightest people or necessarily the hardest workers. This isn't all property management. It's a lower margin business. You have to have a certain scale to do it well. And you have to have the people that really love what they do. If you have a leasing agent who's only there for 6 months till she gets a better job and she's dawdling really slow to the unit, she's fumbling with the keys and she forgets to call you back. If that's your property manager now in a building you own, that's not working. That was my experience when I was in my 20s, renting apartment buildings. Was some of the property managers, I'm thinking, are they ever going to fix the leak in my toilet? Are the shower faucet leaking? It's been 3 weeks. And you start, that experience leads over to when, we're investing in a property. If there's 48 slides in a pitch deck and there's one slide on property management, I'm kind of surprised because I'm thinking,
Sure.
wait, the single highest reason why we underperform the pro forma, if it's in property management, why aren't we taking that more seriously?
Yep.
So
why don't we do this? So you covered a ton of ground here. Like
Sorry, I
probably.
apologize.
Oh no, that's okay. It's you can tell there's some passion about what you're doing here, and I love that. But I want to dig in if we can on a few different things that I heard along the way. The podcast is geared towards that newer guy in the space as well. So I want to make sure some of these terms that you used along the way that maybe we can help and educate as well. Some of those folks that are a little bit less seasoned as maybe we might be. But you mentioned early on, so you spent 10 or 12 years buying, rehabbing, renting out single family homes. And then clearly you found that you mentioned two things. One, the business was scaling and was getting much, much bigger. So you were thinking that you'd have to build systems, potentially hire more people.
Yeah,
exactly.
Too much.
And then you also mentioned, a lot of the phone calls you might be getting. You mentioned an HVAC going out. I had similar situations as well. And I only had 5 units, but it seemed like every month there was some, $750 or $1,000 or $3,000 expense that wiped out my cash flow for the whole year on that specific unit, right? So you mentioned you transitioned over to the passive and you found a syndicator, and the listeners should know what syndicator is, but you mentioned a couple of things. You mentioned pref equity and you mentioned capital stack. Can you talk a little bit more about what those mean?
Sure.
And how they might apply or impact the passive investor?
Yeah, so pref equity is a hybrid. It's a combination of debt and equity. So it has pros and cons. I like it if it's your first deal or if you're older and you're more focused on retirement. So, the pref equities vary, but let's say you think the deal is going to make 15% or more, but the pref equity is 10%. You're entitled to get 10% before everybody gets paid. It's not a guarantee, but you're higher up on who gets paid. So that we'll just cover that part. For some people, 10% is fine. Like some people don't need 15% or 20%, whatever the project is. They just want some certainty. They want to sleep good at night, especially if they're older and they've already built up a certain net worth. Chasing returns isn't really anymore as important as capital preservation.
Yep.
So it depends on your age and your risk tolerance. So like if you're a 20-year-old and you've got a good risk tolerance, you shouldn't be doing pref equity. If you're 65 and you just retired, by all means, do pref equity, lower down your risk, sleep better at night, get a good return. There's nothing wrong with 8%, 9%, whatever the deal is, and get your return. A lot of us still feel it's going to be better than the stock market, way better than the bank, because you're losing money, frankly, in the bank, considering inflation. And in terms of the capital stack, I just mean like in the worst case scenario, if the asset had to get liquidated, who gets paid first? The debtor, the bank essentially, or the lender, is the first one to get paid. Next in line would be the hybrid person, the pref equity. The last to get paid would be the equity holder. Now, clearly, you're not investing into a deal thinking it's going to liquidate, and it doesn't happen obviously very often. But at the same point, like the GFC rolled around, and I wasn't involved back then, but I can imagine there were deals that had to get liquidated. If you're the equity holder, you're the last one to get paid, so you might not get every dollar back. Now, no way am I implying you're not going to get zero. No, you're not going to invest $50,000 into an apartment building and get zero. The buildings don't go to zero. There's a residual value. There's a floor of how low a property is going to go. This isn't like Bitcoin or some outrageous stock that has zero earnings was a scam. Those can go to zero. Real estate's never going to go to zero, but it's unrealistic for a new investor not to have some level of concern that, like, yes, you can lose money. Not every deal works. It's, they throw around the word conservative too often. Emma Powell, who's a friend of mine, one time we're on a Zoom conference call and she said with disgust, if I hear another syndicator say, we underwrite conservatively, I'm going to throw up. I'm going to vomit. Because everybody says it, but what do you mean by it specifically? And we could go into great detail on what is conservative and what's not. And granted, what's considered even the standard for the industry, I would argue, isn't conservative. Bridge debt isn't conservative. It's not bad. I'm not saying it's bad, but it has pros and cons. And there's a reason why you do it. There's good reasons. But you can't look at it as being, well, that's the industry standard, so it's conservative. Those are two separate deals.
Yep.
So for a new investor, the biggest thing is not to get misled by fancy brochures, pretty Excel spread, not Excel, PowerPoints presentations, and drone photos. The best properties necessarily aren't the A-class, community with cabanas and Olympic-sized pools. Not that those aren't, those can be good deals too, but a lot of investors get caught up in the, shiny new object and pretty thing investment. By the same token, you don't want to go too far down the tracks where you're dealing with drive-by shootings and drug dealers in your units. If you're in D-class neighborhood, it's a fine line. So like for me, the deals investors should really be looking at is like an A-class or B-class neighborhood where you're buying, let's say, a B-class property in an A-class neighborhood, and you're going to improve it to get it to the A-class and derive that value. And we call that forced appreciation. We call that value add. And there's a lot of ways they do it, painting or, resurfacing the parking lot, new kitchens and bathrooms, washer and dryer, those things. That's great. Where I have a beef is when somebody says we're doing a value add. I say, okay, what is it? And they say, oh, the last owner wasn't very smart, or they just didn't put enough effort into it. The market can yield $300 more per unit than the guy's charging. He's just undercharging. Right. I have to push back from an ethical standpoint to say, I like that strategy. That strategy mathematically is successful, but don't call it value add. You didn't do value add. You're not giving the residents anything by saying, here's your new invoice. It's $300 higher. What did they get out of it? They didn't get a dog park. You didn't replace the playground. They're not getting a new washer and dryer. what did they get out of it? Don't call that value add. So to me, that's a problem for me with now a trust level with you, the investor. I have to decide, is this someone I can trust? How well do they know their industry? If you're misusing a term, is it ignorance or are you just a really bad person?
Sure.
There's lots of deals out there. And don't get me wrong, I'm here to make money. I like to find an apartment building where, the previous owner undercharged. That's great. But I prefer what I call real value add deals.
Sure.
I don't want to be a slumlord. Nobody wants to do that. I don't want to find out 2 years into a deal that I'm invested in, I'm hearing that the residents are complaining that, it takes 3 weeks before I get a maintenance person to come fix something.
Yep.
Or, God, this building's horrible. I don't want to be invested in that. And, clearly there's good money to be made by keeping tenants. You have lower turnover. People are willing to pay. If your value add is better, people will pay the value add. I'll pay another $100 as a renter now that everything's painted and the hallway doesn't look terrible and I got a nice washer dryer and the kitchen's nice. It's a nicer place to live. I'm happy. But sending me a new, management's taken over. Here's your $300 rent increase. That
Right.
I don't know. That's not cool.
Yeah, I agree. So let's maybe kind of shift into some of those things. When you and I met before, we talked about kind of these GP dirty little secrets, and you mentioned a number of different things, just maybe some pet peeves around underwriting, gap funding. You talked about even you said sexy city, high IRR. I'd love to hear some of your ideas on GP dirty secrets that occur out there that the passive investor should be looking for as they're vetting these operators on the front end.
And it's a tough thing because you have a deal and you want to raise $2 million. If you're really focused on, I gotta raise this money. The better operators don't take shortcuts, but it's tempting especially if it's your first deal or you're early in the career, especially as the deal's getting closer and closer to close and you don't have that capital where you're not necessarily going to do the long game. And what I see is a lot of people say, well, it's worked for the last 5 years, especially when the market was hot and sexy. I can post a bunch of my deals that made oversized returns and then investors flood to me. Not entirely ethical because we all know the next 5 years isn't going to be the last 5 years, most predictably. And secondly, the past is no indicator of future performance. So like an honest syndicator, someone like Trevor Thompson, who's to me like the gold standard of ethics, he's going to tell the investor, I'm glad you came to me. And yes, we've had some great successes, but like we're not going to be promising 30% returns or else the SEC is going to be banging on my door soon enough. There's an upside that could happen. There's also the downside that could happen. Most likely we're aiming for this, 10 to 15 being generally the standard, return. The problem with that 15% return is anybody with a spreadsheet, we can play with the numbers. You and I mean, very quickly, we can just, put a little number here, change a rent assumption, change this, change that, underestimate this, and we can fudge the numbers however you want. You have to have the trust in talking with the syndicator that when you're spot checking their underwriting, they're at least within the relevant range. If you're seeing double-digit rent growth each year for 5 years, that's your run to hill moment, obviously. If you're seeing a huge divergence between revenue and expense, it's not realistic. Properties generally are going to be at 50%, operating budget. You see 30%, it starts making you wonder, are they lying or do they not even understand their real expenses? So like one of the common things that a newer GP will get wrong and have to explain later to the LPs is like taxes. You can't base future taxes just based on last year because if you're doing a heavy value add, when your property gets assessed by the county or the city, your taxes are going to go up. And you just never know too. Like, counties suddenly raise taxes. One of my properties that was a duplex was in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. And I got my property assessment bill, and I'm not kidding, it was up 50%. And a lot of people mishear me and they think 15. And I'm like, no. I mean 50.
Yeah.
And
I had a property in Atlanta that my property tax tripled from
Oh,
one year to
good
the next
Lord.
year.
Wow, I've never heard, I thought 50% was pretty horrible. I
Yeah,
had never heard of
absolutely.
a triple. Good
Yeah.
Lord. I mean, imagine
Yeah.
what
So
that does to cash flow.
those are super important things. When you're talking about $100,000 house, it's one thing, but when you're talking 20, 30, 50, $100 million apartment complexes, that can be hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
That can have a
So,
very big impact on a P&L.
yeah, so like the better operators generally, this is kind of a related pet peeve about underwriting is I hate skinny deals. You know, some deals are just going to go great and everything, you know, you hit every green light and everything, just life goes perfect. That's great. That's not always going to happen. Even the best operators, the best deal, there's going to be problems. You have to have a cushion, a margin, not just reserves, but a cushion within the profitability to absorb stuff. Life happens. So for me, things like I'm really big on, I like upside kickers, is what I call them, or
Okay.
additional streams of revenue. I don't like to see them built into the underwriting. I'd rather you tell me we really did underwrite conservatively, and you really did write on conservatively, and you know we're looking at 15%. But there's an upside. We did include trash valet services, pet fees, storage on site. You know, we didn't include Wi-Fi. All the, you know, I get rubs that you could probably put in underwriting, but like the expense items can be in the underwriting. But the upside revenue items, I like to see those as upside that aren't included in the underwriting. Like Andy, this is a realistic case scenario. Like if things just go okay, we're making money. If things go great, we make tons of money and we have these upside kickers. The thing I notice is that the younger or newer investor, all they care about is flashy cities and flashy results. So a drone photo over Dallas, and they read an article in US News about how hot Dallas is, and they see 19% IRR, and that's the deal they want to invest in. And I'm like, this is the same mistake you guys made when you invested in ARK, you know, in the hot, sexy stock company that was, you know, way overweighted in a handful of tech stocks. And sure enough, it ballooned up and now it's ballooned right back down and you've lost, and a lot of people are losing money. And it's the same kind of concept as, did you look at risk adjusted returns? So like two syndicators both say, we exited a deal, we both had a 15% IRR. Are they really both the same in terms of worth? If one used 50% loan to value, paid out distributions, and another guy was levered to the hilt, never paid a distribution, but they're both reporting a 15% IRR, they're not the same.
Yep.
And it's just kind of foolish of investors to be chasing the hottest and sexy cities, because those are also the ones that when times go bad are going to go the opposite direction, you know, highly
Yeah.
cyclical cities. And I'm not saying don't invest in a cyclical city. I'm saying know what you're getting into. You know, you can invest in Cleveland and sure, it's a linear market and it's going to chug along 2-3% up, 2-3% down maybe. You're not going to get, you know, 50%, you know, returns on it. But you're probably also not going to plummet like a Miami might in a recession, or a Boise, Idaho, or you know, Las Vegas. I think generally is the most cyclical city in America, right? For
Yeah.
regardless of what class of real estate, know what you're getting into. If you're getting into Dallas, like accept that the cap rates are very low now. People are paying very richly. It's like an inverse of a PE, that people are paying like a high PE for a stock. It better perform because those expectations are built into the numbers.
Yep.
So I'm not saying don't invest in Dallas or you should invest in, you know, let's say Rochester, New York, in a relatively stable market.
Mm-hmm.
You need to know what you're getting into. And I don't
Okay.
think a lot of investors know what they're getting into. They just watch a drone photo, they see a nice pool and cabana, and they see 19% IRR, and it's like, okay,
Right.
sign me up. And that's obviously a recipe for disaster.
Well, let's do this if we can. It's clearly you've been extremely well educated in this space. You've put a lot of time and energy into this. But for the traditional investor that's just starting to come over into this space, what type of resources or what type of education path would you say are the best first moves for a new passive investor getting into the space?
You know, honestly, it might sound a little crazy, but those network Zoom meetings that I talk about, I mean,
Yeah.
they're heavily oriented towards syndicators and operators. There's a handful of lenders, brokers, or like a loan guarantor that will attend, but it's largely going to be operators. And if you're a new investor, you don't need to be intimidated. You come into the group, they do breakout rooms, and you introduce yourself. Hi, I'm Phil. I'm from LA. I'm a dentist. I don't want to deal with landlording. I just want to cut a check, get my distributions. Most of the guys that attend these meetings aren't going to be douchebags. They're not going to just, okay, here's an easy mark. I'm going to sell them with some nice photos. They'll tell you the truth. Most of the people in this business are in it. If they're attending a Zoom meeting on their lunch break, they're heavily invested in the long term of the business. So they're gonna tell you, hey, this is what I do. This is the pros and cons of it. If you want to know more, here's my email address. We can talk. They're not going to hard sell you. The other thing is, after meeting you, they might say, hey, this is a guy that would match you well. Because as you know, it's a very collaborative industry. There's tons of money out there. There's a lot of deals. And a lot of times people work together on deals. It's not like other industries where it's, one person wins, one person has to lose, zero-sum game. Real estate's a very relationship-built industry, and a lot of collaboration goes on. So for instance, if I met somebody who is from Buffalo, New York, and they want to just do something conservative, their first investment, I might tell them, hey, why don't you call Eric Charlton? He's my friend. I can vouch for the guy pretty much. I mean, I'm not 100%, but I know the guy. He's a good person. He's in your market. So it might be, for your very first deal, it might be more comfortable where you could get in your car and drive down and you can actually see the building. Eric, you live in the same city, you can catch a beer together. It's, versus, me in Hawaii, it's a little harder. I don't get to meet people in person.
Yeah.
For your very first deal, going with a smaller deal where maybe the minimum's a lot less than some of the larger deals. Minimums can be anywhere from 250, 150, 100, 75,000, 50. There are deals under 50. Maybe your first deal is better off doing $20,000 in a 16-unit apartment building in Buffalo and just getting your feet wet and learning. And then you're like, okay, I've learned it, I've done it, I've exited. I want to do the 400-unit in Texas with the fancy,
drone footage.
Yeah, I mean the guy that's but with an investor who's now famous, a big shot in the business. But I really think you'd be better off if the amount's smaller and it's closer by you and it's a market you're comfortable with and you can sleep at night, versus I'm going to cut a check for some famous guy like a Grant Cardone and buy some resort style community in Florida. You're not going to get the kind of hand holding from Eric like you would from Grant. Now Grant's going to employ investor relations people, but being able to talk directly to the GP initially and build that relationship and get educated, that's really going to be more valuable.
Yeah.
So like the best people that could give you advice are people that have already done 10, 20 deals or 30 deals, or the guys that are the actual operators. And you start learning who you can trust and who you can't. And we're very open. I mean, they'll give you referrals. It's not like other businesses where someone's offended by asking who's your competitors. There's lots of capital out there. I'm not, they're not scared of giving out other names.
Yep.
Texas, as you imagine, it's a huge state. I mean, it's on a global level, it's bigger than a lot of countries in terms of economy. There's lots of deals in Texas. If A class is your thing and I'm a B class operator, I'm just going to refer you to the guy that I know. That's all he does is A class. And if you're really chasing big returns and you got a big risk tolerance and you like to get in there on a C class property that happens to be in a B class neighborhood and that's your game, I know guys that'll do that too. That's what I would recommend.
Okay. So let's do one more question before we kind of jump into the fast ones at the end here. But now that you're pretty well vested in the space, you've been in a number of different syndications, what's next for you and what kind of strategies are you looking at moving forward?
For me specifically, I'm so heavily invested in multifamily, and that's more my personality profile comfort level. But in reading and talking to intelligent people, even outside of real estate, but within investing, the portfolio theory starts coming to play. In a sense, I also created a job for myself without realizing it. So first off, I want to mention that passive is a misnomer. Nothing's really passive in life. Let's just make up a number. Let's say you owned 30 syndications and every single one was, just 50,000, 50,000. and now you've got, what is that, like $1.5 million invested in syndications. It would be dumb to have everything in mailbox money deals, low risk, lower return. Here's your distribution check deal. Because at a certain point, a certain amount of passive income, once you've hit it, the marginal rate of utility for more distribution money would decrease.
Mm-hmm.
So you would have to have, that should be your bread and butter. That's fine. But you would want a certain percentage of the portfolio, let's just say 10% to make it easy. You should have 3 deals that are probably in land development or build to rent, something that takes a longer amount of time, but at that back end, the payoff could be a lot higher. Or, if that's not your thing and multifamily is your thing, you should be mixing and matching. You shouldn't only be in distribution heavy deals. You probably should take on a few value add deals. And there's different levels of value add. By the same token, I've received the capital call on one of my high value add deals. It's not that pleasant. Being told, hey, we're behind on our cash flows, we need an infusion or you're getting diluted. So obviously, by the same token, you wouldn't do 30 high value add deals. That would be madness. That wouldn't be prudent. But most people don't go and buy obviously 30 in one chunk, or not going to have that much money to invest. But as the portfolio starts building up and grows, your role and the way you have to look at the group, it changes as you scale. So for me, having too much in multifamily, the next steps would be, as time goes on, would be to be in like an RV park. So like Donald Spavard and I have talked quite a bit. We have a really good relationship. Vinky Lumba and I are really good friends. She's just an awesome person. I was referred to her because I asked my friend who was a lender. I said, you're a lender, so you know who's good. I haven't had good success in finding someone I want to work with in storage. And he said, great, go with Vinky. And I was like, oh, I'm kind of embarrassed. I didn't know she did storage. I just knew her as a really cool person. So I went and talked to her, and she's like, yeah, Andy, as deals exit next year and storage deals come on, let's hook up. We'll get you in a good storage deal. And she, we know each other. She knows my risk tolerance. She's not going to steer me towards a value add storage deal. She'll probably steer me to a nice, boring, distribution heavy deal that, maybe never is going to be a home run hitter, but fits what I need in my portfolio. Yep. So, similarly, it's industrial, triple net or retail. Once the portfolio grows to a certain size, I'd like to have 1 or 2 of those deals in it, but at no time would it ever be the bulk of the portfolio. I'm 47, I'm young enough, we're in a time of inflation. I wouldn't want an entire portfolio in industrial. It's safe, but the returns are lower. I like it as a ballast to my portfolio. It's like, the 60-40 bond myth. Mm-hmm. Within real estate, there's different sectors that have different risk and return profiles. I like to mix and match them together within a portfolio. The trick is, you can't just pick a vendor. I know multifamily. I don't know triple net. Mm-hmm. So the best way to do it is you ask around, you ask for referrals. That's how you do it. So the best advice I can give somebody, if once you figure out what you want to do, don't be afraid to ask people for referrals. And I don't give them out loosely. I'm not going to give out a name and then find out the guy's a creep and stole your money. I'm pretty loath to give out referrals. Right. And when somebody says, "What's the best investment?" You know where I'm going with this. Just like anything in life, there is no best. It all depends on your circumstances. I can't advise a 65-year-old with a $3 million net worth the same as I'm advising a 30-year-old dentist who makes more money than he needs and he has a wife and 2 small children. It's going to be 2 very different, recommendations of who I match them with.
Very good. Very good. Well, thank you. I feel like we could probably talk for definitely double the time that we have today.
Apologize for being a motor mouth.
No.
Short answers apparently aren't my wheelhouse. Apologize.
No, that's all. I love people that are passionate about this space, and clearly you are. So that you've been just tremendously valuable to the audience. So thank you.
I appreciate that, Randy. Thanks for your patience.
Oh, no. Yeah, that was great. So let's jump into a couple of these things. Now, I know you've got some exciting things going on. So how can my audience support you and what you're doing?
Okay. The best way to get a hold of me is on LinkedIn. Hit me a connect, because frankly, I accept every connect.
Okay.
The bad ones like the scam people or the the Asian girl who wants to be your girlfriend even after you've told them you're married. You
Sure.
can I just hit block for those. That's fine.
Okay.
One thing I've learned about mindset, I just want to be very open to meeting and talking to people. I've met just lots and lots of really wonderful people. Oddly, a lot of them just threw a straight DM like, "Hey, do you want to talk sometime?"
Yeah.
And yeah, okay, I'll talk to anybody. You could be a new investor, you could be a big private equity guy in Canada worth way more money than I'm meeting.
Yeah.
I like meeting them equally the same. You learn from talking to people.
I
The
love
project that I
that.
have, the
Oh, go
project I
ahead.
specifically have is called the CRE Spotlight. And we're going to flip the script, and I'm probably going to twist your arm and make you appear on my show. But
Okay.
you'll get off easy because my show is only 5 minutes long.
I
And
like those.
it's an audio show, so you get that little, the wavy bar that people like to watch. I don't know, it's hypnotizing. And we have captioning on the bottom. And I'm the editor, so I have a much higher appreciation now of editing captions because the AI software does a decent job. Believe me, it doesn't pick up everything. It takes me about 3 to 4 times the time of editing. So if a 5-minute clip will take me 15-20 minutes at least to edit the captioning. And it
Wow.
depends on the speaker. We had George Roberts on, who I always got to plug because he's been incredibly supportive, encouraging to me. He's just a great guy. Angel Williams, Brian Briscoe, these guys. I've had Brian already on the show. I already had George on the show. I'm going to have Brian and Angel. George is unlike the rest of us. He does a lot of podcasts, both as the interviewee and the interviewer, and he gives speeches. So when I did his, I think I did it in 2 takes. I think I edited 2 things out of the entire 4.5 minutes. Most
Wow.
people, it's not like that.
Yeah.
And I just had a guest on, and he hated what he did. The 5 minutes were up. We hit stop, and he got off. And it's like, man, I sucked. I was stumbling with the words. And I was like, don't worry about it. How about we meet in a week? We'll just do it again. And he's like, really? I'm like, yeah, I'm a one-man shop. It's not like I got to get anybody's approval.
Right.
So it's called the CRE Spotlight. And the main focus on it is that we want to be really transparent about. These are our guests. None of the guests I'm getting a sponsorship fee or advertising fees from. There's zero revenue for this project.
Okay.
My expenses is like a $7 a month audiogram account or something. It's very,
There you go.
it's my time.
Okay.
People have asked me, why are you doing it? And it's like, from a selfless standpoint, and I am being serious, I meet a lot of young syndicators. They're doing their first deal or they're in their second or third one. And I want to get them exposure. And the more they do podcasts like yours, the better. But to jump from never doing a podcast to doing a half hour with Randy is a heck of a hurdle and jump.
Yeah.
So for them, I've pitched them, hey, come on my show. It's me. We're friends. It's not exactly intimidating. You already know me. It's not some random guy. And you're not even on video. So if you're rubbing your nose in the middle of the interview, don't worry, no one's going to see it. And it's only 5 minutes. What's the worst that could happen?
Right.
And
Very cool.
I edit everything up and we send it to the person for approval. Only then do I post it. And I only post on LinkedIn. So we're kind of avoiding, trolls and idiots that, make stupid comments on stuff like on YouTube.
Sure.
That was, it was a trade-off between maybe less eyeballs on LinkedIn, but I'm going to get a more focused and mature audience.
Yep.
So we just posted one recently for Tucker Kimbrough. He did what his niche and his passion is short-term rentals, specifically in Yellowstone National Park.
Okay.
It's a double whammy for him is he loves Yellowstone and he likes short-term. So for him, it was, he's been capital raising for multifamily and he learned a ton. And then he realized, no, I got to go pursue my passion. That's my niche. That's where I can shine. And I was like, Tucker, we got to get you on the show, get you more exposure. You're going to be doing, I don't know if it's this year or next year, you're going to be getting on podcasts as you grow. Come cut your teeth with me. It'll be easy. And he was like, yeah, Andy, thanks. Let's get you on the show.
That's awesome.
So we've had Valerie Shira. She did a presentation about virtual assistants that was fabulous. Yeah. And it opened my eyes because that was part of the reason why I wanted her on the show is I was like, should the show ever get to be too successful, I might need to hire a virtual assistant because right now I'm a one-man show and, I'm the booker, the interviewer, the create the graphics, plug in the photo, paste in the LinkedIn profile, edit the, audio. I'm thinking, I never know, maybe I'll need a virtual assistant.
Yeah.
We had Kevin Leonsi was our second guest. He did a great job about demystifying underwriting. He's the equivalent of a CPA in his native Trinidad Tobago. And he's
Okay.
generally a very quiet and shy guy. So he was my second guest. And I specifically was like, Kevin, I need you to get on this show because I need you to be more open verbally with people. You're so brilliant. He's a really, really thoughtful, smart guy. But you almost have to drag it out of him because he's a little on the shy side. So I was like, look, Kevin, we're going to get you on your show. We're going to break you out of that shell.
Awesome.
And then
Well,
our very
I will definitely put that in the show notes. I want to make sure that
all right.
everybody gets
Yeah.
access to that as well. And we're
Running out of
about
time?
coming to the end of the
All
time
right.
that we have here. So I want to be respectful
Let's
of
go. Let's do your
everyone's
questions.
time.
I don't want to talk monopolize
Yeah,
time.
no. That's great. I need to spend more time on your piece as well, because all of those people that you're mentioning are people that I'm seeing in all of these same networking groups where you and I met as well.
Yeah.
So that's fantastic. So let's see, kind of a fun one. What is a recent bucket list item that you checked off, and what is a bucket list item you are hoping to check off soon?
Yeah. I'll admit to being a very boring person. So my bucket list is more investment oriented than lifestyle. You know,
Okay.
I haven't left the state of Hawaii in 14 years. So
Wow.
I don't really travel. I don't really watch TV. Stopped watching sports. Like, I wake up sometimes, 4:30 in the morning, and it's, 3 meetings before I even get to work. Work isn't work. I'm not a W-2. It's a family-owned business. So work ends when work ends. It can be later. It can be 5 o'clock. It's not always 5 o'clock. It can be weekend. And then in the evening, after spending time with my family, my wife and son, and my dog, to be honest, it's more reading and it's catching up on LinkedIn usually, because usually by the time the evening rolls around, I got like 59 notifications. And I'm like, oh, God, how am I going to read all these? That's my day. And it's probably 6 days a week, because even on Saturdays, I have meetings like today. The bucket list for me, to be honest with you, really was having my own podcast. That was one of my bucket list items. And I kept making excuses for myself. You're not a techie. I'm not a technologically oriented person. You're an introvert. What business do you have possibly doing a podcast? Are you insane? The other one was, how can you compete against the Randy Smiths of the world, who's so awesome and he's established? Are you crazy? And one by one, by meeting with people like George and Angel and Brian Briscoe, the guys I attend the meetups with, they all said, no, you don't listen to those silly voices. You can get past being an introvert. You already did it by attending the Zoom meetings. Check that off. Don't compete against Randy Smith. You're not competing. There's tons of different content and people like different forms. I found my niche. My niche is short attention span people that want to just hear bam, 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 the data, get into it. They don't want a lot of introduction. That's my little niche. And then the last part, the techie part, I got hammered. I'll be honest with you. One of my peers that we have the kind of relationship where he can be brutally honest was like, enough of your bullshit excuses, Andy. Learn it. You're going to grow by having the podcast. It's going to force you to learn apps. I'm not a doohickey guy. It's going to force you to learn technology. Stop being a baby and just do it. I was like, okay, thanks a lot for the brutal advice. But we have the relationship where he can drop an F-bomb on me and it's okay. Call me names. It doesn't bother. We have that relationship. And sure enough, what I got to admit, I overestimated the technical side of it. I overestimated how scary it would be, because I chickened out. I hit mute and you talk for the 5 minutes. My job of talking is to just loosen a person up, get them to flow freely so it sounds authentic, not scripted. And then the last part being, how can I compete with Rice? It's real estate. We don't compete with each other. We collaborate. So all those excuses that held me up from ever having a podcast were ridiculous.
Yeah,
That's
I love
all.
it.
Yeah.
99% of the things we're afraid of just never even happen.
We're our own worst enemy.
Exactly. Just make the decision, jump in and do
And
it. Seems to be the advice I hear over and over and over again.
Yeah. So the new bucket list item that went from dream to goal, and now Tony Torres, a friend of mine, you probably know Tony, he's been harassing me relentlessly. I love Tony, but man, the guy's a pit bull when it comes to harassing you with love. I love Tony like a brother. I stated a goal in a post about someday I want to have a conference in Hawaii. And there was kind of threefold. It was one, if I can't travel to the mainland, then heck, just bring all my friends here mentality. That was kind of a crazy idea. And then I was like, well, maybe that's not so crazy. The other thing was, in hearing people attending conferences, you would hear the pros and cons. And I was like, I want to build a conference that is entirely focused on the participants. No agenda, no sponsors. I don't need Shaq to come and speak. I just want people that are really serious about investing. I don't want people coming to Hawaii that are going to attend the first day and not show up days 2 and 3. They're out golfing and snorkeling. I want the hardcore people in a conference, and everybody wants to collaborate and grow. And, I thought about it and I was like, wait, I can do this because we'll just host it. And I don't even care if I make money on the conference. I don't need to make money on the conference. The value I'd receive from having all my friends in one location, just from a pleasure standpoint, would be worth money, let alone, the knowledge and new business relationships or, further building a relationship. So several people have got back to me saying, Andy, so when's it happening? I was like,
I was going to say,
guys, I was
put it on the calendar.
I was sharing a dream with you, whoa, you're putting me to the fire here. And then, other people call me up and say, hey, you said the same thing about a podcast. And I'm like, wait, the scale's a little different. Hosting a little podcast and hosting an in-person conference, a little different. So then, funny enough, there's not a lot of us in Hawaii, but there's a few. And so I got to meet Benjamin Yeager and his wife, Jana Yeager. And we had a breakfast together. And poor thing, they were looking at their watch towards the end because, I'm a motor mouth. And Benjamin is too. We get along good. It had been 2 hours. We had our breakfast. And towards the end of the conversation, he was talking about a project he had that I said, I'll help you since I'm local. And that he brought up, hey, what about this dream I saw in your post about having a conference someday? I was like, yeah, it's gone from dream to goal, but reality might be a little bit different. And he said, well, how about I help you? And it just totally changed my mindset. Why didn't I think about having a partner sooner? I didn't have to do everything myself. So that's what the CRE spotlight or my role in real estate should be. When I'm in a breakout room with you and you're discussing a challenge you're having, I don't like the word problem, a challenge you're having. Mm-hmm. If I can tell you, hey, call this guy, he had the same challenge. He can, give you some mentoring advice, or, that broker you're dealing with sounds lousy. I know a broker in that area. Go work with this guy, or the lender's jerking you around. Well, there's other lenders. We both know Moishe Orange. He's a great guy. If someone was saying that they're getting the runaround with their lender, I would say call Moishe for a second opinion, or perhaps he can help you. That's the exciting thing about real estate, is that collaboration aspect. Like Isaac Weinberg and I are good friends, and he's a cost seg guy. If anyone ever said, hey, I own a bunch of nice luxury houses that I rent out, and I never got around to cost segging them, who do you recommend? Immediately I'm going to be telling them, call Isaac, he's my guy.
Yeah.
But that's what's exciting about real estate. I can call you up and say, hey, I'm looking at a property in Ocala, Florida. Randy, do you know anybody? And you might say, hey, you should be talking to Emma Powell. Her group just invested in a multifamily in that area. Now, while it's multifamily, not the single family, she knows the area. She knows people now in that area. You'd steer me to her. That's the kind of thing that I think that the main takeaway from this meeting would be is, don't try to be a lone wolf. Build friendships, build trust, build relationships. Give. Yeah. That's a real big thing too. Is you can't just show up once to a networking meeting and think, okay, great. After this network meeting, I'm going to get 20 investors. That's not how it works. You know that. But I go to enough meetings, and it's been enough months. I see guys that they come in once, they monopolize the entire breakout room with their issue, and then we never hear from them again. Yeah. And I actually, funnily enough, I heard back from one person. We had a mutual acquaintance. And in talking with my mutual acquaintance, he was like, yeah, I know so-and-so. And he was saying, you steered me wrong. Networking groups suck. I didn't get any investors. And my friend William Robinson, who's a great guy, says to him, well, how many times did you go? And which one did you go to? And he says, well, I went to so-and-so's meeting and I went once. And he's like, palm slapped himself. No, man, you're thinking transactionally. You're not thinking relationally. Like, you're not going to just show up in one meeting and, get investors. So he asked me, do you know so-and-so? I was like, yeah, I met him. He goes, well, how did it go? I said, well, he kind of talked about himself the entire breakout room. So like 11 minutes of the 12 minutes, and then we never see him again. And he goes, sorry, I'm getting it didn't go well with you. I'm like, well, I don't want to bash somebody, but yeah, that kind of, I'm not saying made me mad, but it was slightly offensive in terms of lacking of social skill. But I'm forgiving because it was a young guy. Mm-hmm. I always believe that the guys in their 20s, when they're in their 40s, 50s, like guys like us, I'm late 40s, you're turning 50. We remember when we were 20 and we were dumb. So we want to give a grace to the younger guys. But the sooner they can pick up that it's the long game,
Mhm.
and it's relationship, the better. And it
Yeah.
goes for passive investors too. It's not just the GPs that relationships matter. You're not going to get the level of recommendations, referrals from other passive investors if you don't give back to other people. People see you on LinkedIn, say, "Hey, I know a guy in Florida that can help you because you have a relationship." That makes me later, when I see you asking a question, it makes me want to help you more.
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
I might, instead of me just saying, "Hey, call this guy," I might call that guy up and say, "Hey, there's this guy. Can you help him?" And take a little more effort to do a warm introduction, because
Yep.
I've seen in the past that you're a giver. Because givers want to help people that give. I don't want to help
Yep.
them much.
Giver's gain. Definitely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think that's a big takeaway. Is even if you're passive, it does there's room for you to give and to benefit from relationship building.
Awesome. Well, this has been absolutely amazing. I feel like we squeezed so much into this, and I think there's so much more that we could get from a furthering the conversation with you as well. So no doubt I'll be reconnecting with you and look forward to seeing you on all these networking events. But
Oh, I appreciate it.
yeah, no, it's been a ton of fun. So thank you though again for being on the podcast today. What I'll say to the audience is definitely reach out. I'll put his contact information in the show. As you can tell by the time that we spent together, he's got a tremendous amount of knowledge. He's extremely skilled and knowledgeable in this space. Reach out. He definitely will hop on a phone call with you or help you with anything that you're looking for. And definitely check out his CRE Spotlight,
Thank
where
you.
I suspect I'll be on
I'll
that
be
at
I'll be
some
twisting
point in
your
the
arms.
future.
Don't worry.
But yes, thank you again for joining the Gentle Art of Crushing It podcast, Passive Investing Edition. Until next time, thank you so much, Andrew.
I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you, Randy. It was so much fun talking to you.
Awesome.
Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Another episode of The Gentle Art of Crushing It. It was an amazing episode. We know we sure learned a lot, and we hope you did as well. We want to take a second and thank you so much for viewing or listening to this episode. And please just know that we only ask for one favor, and that is to make this life magnificent. Thank you, and have a wonderful day.